Hi everyone, my name is Grace Howe and I chose to focus on the death penalty for my policy brief. So just a little introduction. The death penalty, also known as capital punishment, is legal under the Federal Death Penalty Act of 1994. And there's a lot of policy issues right now with the death penalty, including race, representation, and innocence. I'm going to focus on the cost policy issue. So on the chart on the right there, you can see it's showing the number of executions since 1976. And in 2021, there was 5 executions. So history and capital punishment policy. So in 1972, the federal death penalty was said to be unconstitutional under the 8th and 14th Amendments. Following a certain case in 1976, the Supreme Court determined that the death penalty was constitutional under some certain circumstances. So more than 2,500 individuals were on death row as of December of 2020. And this was across 29 different states, and one inmate in New Hampshire was on death row even though it was abolished in 2019. So they still had one person on the death row even though it was no longer legal in the state. So the problem that I'm discussing is the fact that executing someone on death row is very costly, and there's a lot of different factors that contribute to this cost that I'll discuss on the next slide. So the different costs associated with the death penalty are kind of grouped into a few different categories, those being pretrial costs, jury selection, legal costs, trial, incarceration, and appeals. So for legal costs, or for pretrial costs, capital cases tend to be a lot more complicated than non-capital cases, and they take a lot longer to go to trial. And then for the testing, experts will need to be utilized for forensic evidence as well as mental health checks, and then just the background and life history of the defendant. When it comes to jury selection, they all need to be questioned on their views about the death penalty. So it's a lot more time consuming, and obviously with that time consuming, expenses rack up as well. Legal costs. So a lot of people who face the death penalty can't afford their own attorney. So that's why court-appointed lawyers are needed, or the state assigns public defenders. And then pay for the prosecution. Cost of prosecution is also a factor in the cost. So regarding the trial itself, just the trial, when someone goes on trial for the a crime and it's for death penalty, it can be 4 times longer than just a regular trial that's not involved with death penalty. So that obviously requires the jurors and attorneys to be there for a lot longer time, so you have to pay them. And then incarceration, most death row persons need to be on solitary confinement in a separate facility. So those require a lot more security and other accommodations, as the prisoners are in their cell for 23 hours a day. So basically for incarceration, it's just it's a little more tightly secured, which costs more. And then appeals. To minimize mistakes, every prisoner is entitled to a series of appeals. The costs are at the taxpayer's expense, basically. So these appeals are essential because some inmates have come within hours of execution before evidence was uncovered proving their innocence. So all of those costs together don't seem like they'd really be a lot, but when you look at the grand total of things, it's a lot of money. So this chart I just have showing, this was the money spent on California's death penalty. Not sure what year this was, but on the far right column, you can see that that is pre-trial and trial costs at almost $2 billion. And then the next one over is cost of incarceration, which is almost, well, just right at $1 billion. So both of those are just two of the 5 categories that I discussed, and that's $3 billion right there. So regarding legislation, Iowa's legislation, Senate Study Bill 1004 was supposed to reestablish the death penalty to be valid for the crime of kidnapping, rape, and murder of a minor. It was introduced in January of 2021 and referred to the Judiciary Committee. After that, it failed to make it out of the committee, so it really went nowhere. At the federal level, the Federal Death Penalty Prohibition Act, as well as the Federal Death Penalty Abolition Act, was introduced in January of this past year. So those were both had the goal of abolishing the federal death penalty, and they've been referred to their subcommittees regarding crime. So those are still kind of in the works. Trump's administration, when Trump was still in office, his administration had permitted additional methods of execution of capital punishment at the federal level, and this was right before his term ended. And then Biden is working on trying to reverse this. So previously, the only methods of execution used at the federal level was lethal injection, but Trump's administration has permitted it, so like other methods can be used as well. So regarding current policies on the death penalty, these were all found on the American Bar Association website. The late adolescent death penalty resolution is a resolution to an issue that was already occurred, so now it's a policy. But basically it says that if the defendant was 21 years or younger at the time of the offense, they're trying to prohibit the death sentence or execution. So basically, if you're under 21 when you committed a crime, you can't be executed or spend life in prison. The discredited forensic science resolution basically just is a policy just to ensure that the forensic evidence is credited and it's real and helpful. The jury policy basically just says that when someone's convicted of a crime, the jury has to vote on if they want to go through with death penalty. So the execution transparency resolution, basically, it's just a policy to basically be open and public about the execution and any relevant information with it. The wrongful execution policy, it's just basically a policy put in place, so there's a procedure that should allow for fair determination of actual innocence, and then awarding the compensation if there was a wrongful execution. The mental illness resolution basically just says that the jurisdictions that impose capital punishment to implement policies and procedures basically have to show respect to defendants and prisoners with intellectual disabilities or mental impairments. And then the elimination of the racial discrimination policy basically just has a goal of eliminating racial discrimination, and legislatures are required to conduct racial and ethnic disparity impact analyses. So these are just a few of the current policies. I didn't list all of them, but there's a lot of policies that are associated with the death penalty. Okay, and then challenges to implement these policies. So basically all of those already are policies because they're resolutions to a previous issue. So there's no current solution for the cost of the death penalty other than proposed items. There's no policy set in place yet. Regarding public opinion, so the pie chart on the left kind of shows basically what the voters thought. So this was from a 2010 poll, and 33% were for the death penalty, and then 61 were opposed. So this was a while ago. I would assume that if the same study was done today, the results would be quite similar. But that just kind of shows what the public thinks about death penalty. So alternative solutions to the death penalty to eliminate this cost issue. Life without parole is the highest sentencing option other than the death penalty. So obviously that would be the second option if the death penalty was abolished. And then the death penalty abolitionist movement has aimed to abolish the death penalty. And then eliminating the death penalty and utilizing life without parole would be a cheaper solution for the United States, so for the federal death penalty and the states as well. And then I just kind of found this statistic interesting. So in California, the current system costs $137 million per year, and the death penalty is legal in California. So without the death penalty, it would cost $11.5 million. So just kind of think about the difference in the cost of that. Those are my references. Thank you all for listening.